mastermind behind the awakening. And this is Stephen Atkins.
Thank you for inviting me to come here. It's an amazing place. I'm very bashful because I've never been called a mastermind in my whole life. I was instructing at Capilano College, or Capilano University up on the North Shore, and I have a theater history course. And one of the units that I have in my theater history course is an incredibly, obnoxiously condensed and reductive week that we spend on non-Western theater traditions, which is supposed to include Japanese theater, Chinese theater, Sanskrit theater, ridiculously reduced. And I just felt that this was so impoverished that I wanted to have a practitioner who did Chinese opera to come and do a workshop for my students. And Rosa very graciously accepted my call for help. And since then, we've just been bantering back and forth on how to make this a better situation for the Cantonese opera. So Rosa's energy is just infectious, and I'm very happy to be along for the ride. In this little brief unit, we're going to be talking about fusion opera and what could that be. I'm going to give you a little story pitch about what the story is so far for the Awakening, and just an idea of what we have coming ahead. And I just wanted to say right away that we don't have a real formula or a plan. We're basically casting off into each other's imaginations and cultural backgrounds. And I have a quote here, which can't really be seen, but one can't really discover new oceans unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. So I'm kind of giving up a lot of my ideas and my ego about my theater tradition, and we're just sort of blending things together. As I said before, I'm Dr. Stephen Atkins. I'm a faculty member at Capilano University, and I thought I should put this up here because just a couple of weeks ago I was granted a small grant to release me from some teaching at the university, and the research office has given me a little bit of funds to hire some student interns to help us out. So a great thank you to Capilano University for their support. So fusion opera. So it could be a dynamic art form that blends the rich traditions of Cantonese opera with music, dance, and other performance styles from diverse cultures. We don't really know what it is yet, and perhaps it will never be fully defined as we collaborate and dynamically form these things from project to project. I've been sort of following the wisdom of this professor in Germany. Her name is Erika Fischer-Licht, and she has written a very, very interesting, long track of scholarship on intercultural theater, and she pointed out a pretty interesting thing about what we call intercultural collaboration. It's usually very binary, and we usually think of it as quite Eurocentric. We think of, at least in a Eurocentric culture, we think of intercultural collaboration as like European culture collaborating with some other people. And I want to say right away that we're here to challenge that. We're here to look at it in the way that Erika Fischer-Licht suggests. And that is any two cultures combining their creative resources and their aesthetic traditions to create a third thing that is possibly transformative for all participants. That's really our goal. It's lofty, and it might take time, but we're being very patient with each other, so it's pretty good. The Awakening is set, as Rosa said before, in Vancouver's Chinatown in the years of World War II. Chinese Canadians are persevering with the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is contributing significantly to their communities and continuing to contribute to their communities in spite of the systemic injustice, just in the way that Rosa was saying. These slides are a little bit redundant. They overlap with Rosa's. But basically, the Exclusion Act came out of the head tax, which was established in 1885. And it was designed specifically to exclude Canadian-born Chinese from voting, from having citizenship rights that regular citizens enjoyed, and also from entering professions. So doctors, lawyers, engineers, as Rosa was saying, were off limits. Well, this became a little bit of the thing that shook it up was the war. We had two Canadas. We had Canada for European people and Canada for Chinese people. But the Chinese were initially barred from even enlisting in the war, which would have given them more rights. So what happened was in 1944, a very significant thing happened, and that was that England decided to enter war with Japan. And I think one can read many cynical things into this, which is suddenly people's use was seen, which is something, it's a cynicism that isn't lost on me, and it's something that maybe we want to highlight in this. So as Great Britain commits to the conflict in Japan, Canada was forced to look at itself. And Canada was, of course, one of the Allied forces, and the United States had already begun integrating Chinese Americans into their military forces, which set a precedent that Canada couldn't ignore if they were going to be an ally. The brave souls. So the service of these people highlighted the hypocrisy and catalyzed post-war policy changes, including the repeal of the Exclusion Act eventually, and granting Chinese Canadians the right to vote in 1947. So our story and our plot line is set in this time of upheaval, of conflict, and of hope. And I'm really kind of vibing in with Rosa. Every time we check in with each other, I get a different sense of the emotional landscape of this story. And the sense of hope and the sense of dreams for people, and I think rather really smartly, Rosa has set much of this in the Sing Kew Theatre. And to me, theatre has always been the place where dreams are expressed and hope is manifested. So the political setting is simply the backdrop, really, for a story of friendship, of true love, of self-discovery, and the courage to stake everything on a dream for a better future. So it's really a story about youth. Over 6 acts, the lives of the following characters, who you'll see in the following slides, intertwine, profoundly transforming one another and creating lasting change. Now, I've used AI in my presentation, and I want to make you aware of the fact that I'm fine with using AI as like my doodle pad. I don't really see it as anything that guides or directs my creativity. One thing that I do notice is that I've asked it to deliver me some pictures with the aesthetics of the 1940s. And it's beginning to reveal the biases and the, and the stuff that AI has. So I want you to know that as we go through some of these, the pictures will be saccharine, they will be like really formulated to the 1940s, and for me it's revealing that AI is simply a surface. And what we want to do as artists is to get under that surface and find the flesh and bones of the story. So here we have our main heroes. The main hero is Peony and her friend May, who are 2 actresses. Peony and May have just immigrated to Canada, and they perform at the Sing Kew Theatre. Their journey to a new life is tainted, however, by this looming threat. As many people know of the history of immigration, that there was a very hefty head tax that usually couldn't be paid by the immigrant and had to be sponsored. So they had this very, very big financial debt that they owed a certain person. The other thing that's a very interesting character point for Peony is that she was one of the daughter of a father who was one of the bachelors who left them. So she learned English at a nunnery, at a convent. This is the man who sponsored them, Jack, who has some underworld affiliations. The local crime lord, in fact, with friends in high places. His presence in Chinatown is a dark cloud that puts a pall on the community and the self-esteem of Vancouver's merchants and the residents of Chinatown. And here's our other hero, the romantic hero, James. He's not currently an engineering student. He aspires to be an engineer, but he's taking classes. And he's a student from Calgary, Canadian-born. James is idealistic and a romantic with a deep sense of justice, and he works hard at achieving a good education to build a brighter future for himself and others. But his heart is instantly captured when he sees Peony performing at the Sing Kew Theatre, falls instantly in love, even though to his friends, says, no, I'm not really not. His friends from school include Kevin and Connie, his own sister. They are actually a bit of a couple. They're dating right now. So all these characters converge in a scene at the Sing Kew Theatre during a performance by Peony and May, but the evening is spoiled by the gangster Jack, who behaves belligerently and taunts Peony and May about knowing the money. And of course, Kevin, and especially James, are quite offended by his behavior, which erupts in kind of like a rumble. There's a kind of a little bit of Grease is going through my head right now, or maybe the West Side Story, you know, with some ideas of using different fight choreographies and musical stylings. But our characters, as Rosa had prompted, we're not dwelling on injustice, we're not dwelling on hate and dismay and so forth. We're dwelling on the fact that these are young people and they live lives, and just as the youth of today, they're obsessed with current technology and the latest crazy music, which includes the radio and jazz. So this is going to lead us to have a swing dance scene in the streets of Chinatown. But we can't ignore the fact that there is this undercurrent, that there is this spirit of change that needs to happen. There's pressure. And from that pressure, eventually comes the need to protest one's rights. Again, it's AI, and everything on there is going to be gibberish. AI doesn't write words, it just makes images. So the protests erupt against this relentless injustice, defying the will of Jack, who is actually benefiting from the fact that most of the people their spirits have been broken. And he can use this, and he can manipulate this community into serving him and his needs. However, there's an unlikely ally. And this is a guy named William. He's from the immigration office. And he comes in and sort of settles down some of the people and proposes this idea that there's some things that are happening in Ottawa, and there might be some opportunities. So he starts to sort of help the community, and he assists them in kind of finding the courage to find other ways of getting what they want, rather than protesting, and rather than through this disobedience. So James and Kevin eventually see the opportunity to perhaps enlist as an opportunity to change the world. The sacrifice, of course, is that they have to leave their true loves behind. And it could be a very emotional, an emotional scene, and a very, very interesting point for the characters to reveal their true nature. So I'm not going to give too many more spoilers because there's some more drama to occur in Acts 4 and 5. But one of the things that I believe very strongly in is what I call a web of values, or a network of values, when you're creating a story. And it works with linear storytelling, but it also works with music and dance. And rather than thinking of things in terms of a line that the story goes through, we can think of it as a constellation of values that we want to hit on. And so the values that are in this will lead us to ideas of the dramatic situations in the music that we'll create. The values are opposed. There's the axis of the community versus the individual. And we can see that in many different ways, right? A person bemoaning or feeling grieving for their own past versus their commitment to the people around them and to the friends that they're making. Or in Jack, who sees the community as his wedge to make himself successful and wealthy on the backs of others, versus the community that he should be helping out, like the models of the merchants and the very successful, wealthy people. There's passion versus indifference, and conflict versus a shared hope, right? So what we hope to do in these scenes and in the music is to have these different themes and counter-themes opposing each other and blending with each other to create the story. This is the very first time I've ever written for an opera of any kind, so I'm very, very happy and very lucky to have experts around me who will grow my world and give me a new kind of garden to play in. I'm using a lot of metaphors here. And so I find that music is probably a very, very interesting medium, rather than simply dialogue or simply storytelling. Music has far more opportunities to employ metaphor effectively. So this is a story, I hope, in a world where, I'm doing the pitch for the movie, where traditions bring people together for a strong future, and a quiet revolution transforms the pain of the past into hope for the future. So looking into the future, as I said before, I feel very good about our collaborative energy that we have so far, because we don't really know what we're doing, but we all have a strong faith in our own backgrounds, but we're not exerting or imposing that on each other. And we're inviting sort of this creative alchemy where distinct elements of two cultures intermingle. My performance culture isn't any one culture. I don't really come from a monolithic thing. My background is that I'm English, I'm a UK citizen, and I'm a permanent resident of Australia. And in going between those two places, I teach here in Vancouver. So my background is very multicultural, and especially in Asia, it's very, in Australia rather, it's very Asia forward, Asia facing. And so many of my collaborative opportunities there have been with Chinese and Japanese theater companies and dance companies. So I bring with this, bring to the mix a kind of broad scope of references and a willingness to play and to have fun. And I have a very strong faith that what we have coming up is going to be energetic and entertaining so that we can bring more people in and enjoy the vocabulary and the aesthetics of Cantonese opera. I end with just this picture for nostalgic reasons. Thank you very much.